cieux devant toi. Splendeur et majesté, corps infiniment grand, infiniment petit, et pas de firmament.
The African American Burial Ground, a national monument. 15,000 Africans and African Americans were buried here in the 17th and 18th centuries. They were builders of New York City. In the 1790s, the burial ground was closed. The land was sold. Now it's a national monument. Sometime in 1787, Pierre Toussaint, a 21-year-old slave from Haiti, arrived with his owners on a ship that docked somewhere in Lower Manhattan. Toussaint was a house slave of the Berard family who owned a sugar plantation in Haiti. They were escaping from the country which was then on the verge of a bloody revolution. Pierre Toussaint is remembered in the African American Museum next to the burial ground. Across from the museum is Reed Street. The Berards, with their slaves, Pierre, Rosalie, his sister, Marie, his aunt, moved into 20 Reed Street. 3,000 other Haitian refugees settled near here. Reed Street's a few blocks away from Wall Street. 2 years after Pierre Toussaint arrived, George Washington took the oath as first president on the balcony of Federal Hall on Wall Street. Refugees from Haiti were welcomed in New York. France helped America during its revolution. But shortly after arriving, Jean-Jacques Berard, the head of the household, died of pleurisy. He left his household destitute. Pierre almost immediately became their provider as a hairdresser, and his hairdressing skills soon attracted wealthy New York society women looking for the elaborate French styles of the day. Pierre's skills paid well. St. Paul's Chapel, the oldest church in New York City. Most of Toussaint's clients and society friends worshipped here and in Trinity Church close by. Mary Ann Schuyler, from a famous colonial family, was one of the first to welcome Pierre into her home. She introduced him to others from her circle, like Eliza Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton's wife. Mrs. Church Kruger, daughter of Angelica Schuyler Church, sister-in-law of Alexander Hamilton. They welcomed Toussaint into the finest homes in New York. The women found him a trusting confidant and a friend. Their children found him charming, a warm, charismatic black man in a red jacket. One of them said, "Toussaint, he came every day to our house to dress my mother's hair and our hair too. My sister and I loved him. He taught us so many things." Toussaint also taught them from his favorite French spiritual writers. Pierre Toussaint got to know the city of New York very well. The city had deep problems then as it does now, and Toussaint became involved in them. Each day he walked miles to the homes of the wealthy and the famous, but he also knew the streets of the poor, the slaves and the sick, yellow fever, smallpox, the cholera. They were frequent then, and Toussaint drew from his own resources and the support of his prominent friends to help. He helped needy black children and orphans whom he arranged to be taught a trade. He arranged the release of slaves, and he didn't forget either French widows like his own mistress. Someone said to him once, "Toussaint, you're richer than anyone I know. You have more than you need. Why not stop working now?" "Madame," he said, "I have enough for myself, but I have not enough for others." Toussaint had a family of his own. At 45, he married Mary Rose Juliet at St. Peter's Church. He arranged her freedom from slavery, and 4 years earlier he was freed by his own mistress on her deathbed. Toussaint and his wife adopted the child of his sister Rosalie, who died after childbirth. He named her Euphemia after the saint of the day. She was a frail child and not expected to live, and so he walked her each day down to the Battery for fresh air to strengthen her lungs. Toussaint wanted her to live, to thrive. But tragedy struck. On May the 11th, 1829, Euphemia died at the age of 14. Toussaint was 63. Her death caused him profound sorrow. He seemed lost for a time. He continued daily visits to church, and he redoubled his work for orphans. Pierre Toussaint had a profound religious faith. How can we describe it? It wasn't that he was simply born good. Those who knew him knew better. An early biographer said shortly after his death that he was governed by the plain, powerful teachings of Christianity. He often quoted in his native language from the Sermon on the Mount, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are the merciful." The Beatitudes seemed to have found a way to his heart. His heart overflowed with that Christian kindness which surpasses mere worldly politeness. His pity for the suffering was like the Savior's at the tomb of Lazarus. Toussaint was devoted to his church. His prayer book was always in his pocket. Religious books were his daily food. He attended Mass each morning at St. Peter's Church. He was nourished by the sermons of the great French spiritual writers. He knew the imitation of Christ. He showed his faith by the way he spoke and lived. He's honored today by the Catholic Church, and his cause for sainthood is being pursued. At the end of Wall Street, symbol of financial America, is a plaque commemorating the slave market opened there from 1711 to 1762. New York City's slave market was second only to the one in Charleston, South Carolina. So how did Pierre Toussaint, a slave himself, look at slavery? For one thing, he sought freedom for slaves. He bought his sister's freedom, his wife's freedom, and others. He himself became free in 1807. An early biographer says, "We cannot doubt how highly he prized liberty for the slave, yet he was never willing to talk on the subject. He seemed to comprehend the difficulty of emancipation. Once when a lady asked him if he were an abolitionist, he shuddered and replied, 'They've never seen blood flow as I have. They don't know what they are doing.'" During Toussaint's time, cries for abolition of slavery were common in New York. But he never became a member of the abolitionist movement. He feared mayhem would come, like the violence that engulfed Haiti in its struggle for freedom. He followed the beatitude, "Blessed are the peacemakers." So, while he respected the desire of the abolitionists for freedom, he believed how he lived his own life was the way of making peace. He was a pacifist, not adhering to a movement, but following the will of his Heavenly Father. Philip Schuyler summed up what New York thought of Toussaint when he died June the 30th, 1853. "I have known Christians who are not gentlemen, and gentlemen who are not Christian, but one man I know who was both, and that man was black." Today, the remains of Pierre Toussaint rest under the altar of St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York City. He was a great man, a holy man.